Coming up on Outlook, we're taking the show on the road. We are coming to you from the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center, and we'll be talking with Congressman Brett Guthrie. Outlook is next. Hello and welcome to this edition of Outlook. Now, if you're watching the show or you watch it on a regular basis, you might be looking around thinking something's different with that studio. Well, actually, we've taken the show out of the studio. We are coming to you from Pod 300 of the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center. This is a really neat collaboration. You know what PBS is all about. Its mission is to educate, enlighten, and inform, and we're doing just that. We've collaborated with the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center, and some of the residents here for the past 10 days have been working with our production crew. It's a vocational education opportunity and we're very proud of it. And so as we speak, you can't see them because we can't show them to you, but they're behind the cameras and they are literally running the show today. So we're excited about that. And we're also excited to have with us Congressman Brett Guthrie, who represents Kentucky in the U.S. Congress. How are you?
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. When I was in the state legislature, this was actually completed when I got to the state legislature, but the mission of trying to regionalize our juvenile justice system, get them out of counties and into their own system so you could do things like this, was something that was real important. Governor Patton at the time, if you remember, was the governor and really had a big push on that. And I remember opportunities to fund that in the state budget. So it's fun to be here. It's fun to see the people that are here and they're learning something that stick with them and give them a great future.
Absolutely, there are careers in broadcasting.
Absolutely,
we can tell them that.
I have a daughter going into broadcasting.
You do,
so
congratulations.
There's a great career in broadcasting.
Yes, that pays money, right? We have lots to talk about. Let's just get right to it. You know, the fact that we're coming from the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center to you on this day. Let's talk about justice reform. Governor Matt Bevin has put together a council. He's going to give them 6 months to come up with the 23-member council to come up with some ways to reform the justice system.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that's state, and we're looking at federal, and one of the leaders in the federal justice reform, and we have different committees that we're involved in and things that we're on, so certain people grab a hold of certain issues and move them forward, is Senator Rand Paul from the federal side of it. But I remember when I was in state government, as Governor Bevins, we were building prisons, we were building jails, we were building centers like this, and now we're to the point, wow, do we really need everybody incarcerated? Are there other things that we can do? What benefit does it have for people when they're always incarcerated? And we're looking at an opioid bill we just passed, was signed, and there are a lot of people who get incarcerated because they get addicted. And so what I would say when I'm talking about the opioid bill, they're not criminals, they're not addicted because they're criminals because they're addicted. And if you can deal with the addiction, then you deal with the behavior. And so if you can deal with that, and so there's some areas I think that there are obviously people in the drug world who are providing, who are selling, who are pushing, whoever, that do need to be off our streets in a way. But there are a lot of people who just some of them get addicted. As I study, we're doing this, I said, opioid bill we just finished. There are countless stories and anecdotes and stories of people who were playing sports and they got hurt and I had a mom in Owensboro and they got addicted to pain pills with a legitimate use, with a legitimate subscription. When their subscription ran out, their body had demanded it, and there were some that led to criminal behavior because they went from OxyContin to heroin. And the one story I'm thinking of in Owensboro, the daughter actually passed away. That's why the mom tells the story. And so
she doesn't want it to happen to other people.
But that's what we can look at. We need to protect citizens. And sometimes you have to take people on the streets to protect them. But there are a lot of people in our criminal justice system that can be punished in other ways and make amends in other ways, and not always have somebody behind bars.
Well, so what you're saying is when you were in the State House, you were looking at ways, to build prisons. Let's put more people.
I was in that era when we were funding, and a lot of times the crime started dropping, people were put away.
Sure.
And so you got to balance that. You can't just open the door and let people out, but you got to look at alternatives because it's extremely expensive to begin with. And one, the recidivism. If you put people in, you want people to come out, you want them, what you're doing here. You want people to say, hey, there is something I can do that makes me different, and I didn't realize I could do this before. Sometimes people are in here, particularly where we are, because they're young, and they just either didn't have opportunities, weren't aware of their opportunities, and so groups like your group coming in here, PBS coming in, WKU coming in here, and saying, wow, I mean, I can see them. The people on TV can't see them, but you got some outstanding young men, and all of them here are men. I'm sure you have ladies in here as well. All the outstanding young men that are running this show.
They are running this show.
And very professional before the show when we were talking to them.
Exactly. And so for those of you that might just be tuning in, what we're referring to is the fact that we've taken Outlook on the road. We are coming to you from inside a pod. They have things called pods, P-O-D. We're in pod 300 of the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center, and running camera, running the whole show today, along with our production team, are residents of this facility. And so it's kind of a nice vocational educational opportunity to show them that, yeah, there is something outside these walls.
There's something else. And once you do that, then people can go, there's a Green River facility over in Butler County, and I said everybody on earth has done something wrong. There's only one perfect one that's ever walked, in my opinion. And so the question is, what did you do and how much did you do and what brought you here? The question is, what are you going to do when you're out? And that's what reaching to people. And the problem in our justice system, too, because my family has a business, you're also an employer, and you're obligated to your other employees to make sure you have fellow employees that they're going to be not issues. But it gets people trapped, too, that they do have an issue, they do have a felony, they show up.
Let's talk about that, the trap, because Governor Bevin at the state level is looking at expungement and those kinds of things, restoring voting rights to felony offenders. At the federal level, is that something that you think that we will see?
We have to look at it. Well, of course, it's a little different than the state level because Kentucky does have, unless you're expunged or you get a pardon or clemency, then you lose forever. Your voting rights, your right to own a firearm, all the other things that you lose. Federal level is a little different, but that's something we're definitely looking at. I think, like I said, Senator Paul's kind of leading, from my view of it, is leading the effort from Washington on that. And has reached out to a lot of people, reached across the aisle, and I think it's something that's time has come. Senator McConnell has a former person that worked for him in Washington, D.C. He's moved back to Kentucky, and he's leading a nonprofit kind of group on criminal justice reform. And I think it's a time that's come. We just got to do it. We got to make sure we do it in a way that keeps people safe, but also gives people an opportunity instead of just continuing to be in and out of the system.
Okay, so
and that's the balance we have to strike, and that's what we do. That's where the debate is. It is a tough balance.
Yeah, that's a tough balance.
Well, like I talk about our business, so you have somebody come in and they have a felony on their record, and you want to know what that is and see what it is because you want to. Do I bring somebody in that might have some issues with our fellow employees? We owe it to our other. So you get trapped. You can't have a hiring that's going to threaten your other employees.
Right.
But you also, because I know our business likes to bring people in and give them a chance. And so that's a balance you have to strike, and it's sometimes it's not black and white. It's sometimes it's gray, and you have to make some judgment calls in that.
Deserving a second chance. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to take a short break here on Outlook as we come to you from the Warren County Regional Juvenile Detention Center. More with Congressman Brett Guthrie when we continue. Stay with us. Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. We are taking the show on the road. We are coming to you from inside a pod at the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center. This is a vocational education opportunity. We've collaborated, WKU-PBS has collaborated with the center here to do some workforce training. We've brought in our production team, and for the past 10 days, we've been working with, at this point, I think it's about 9 residents throughout the days, and they are actually running the show today. They are running camera, they are running switcher, they're doing it all as we bring you a conversation with Congressman Brett Guthrie. Before the break, we were talking about juvenile justice reform.
Right, exactly.
At the state level, it's a big issue, and you're telling me at the federal level, same deal.
Same deal. Absolutely. It's a time that I think has come. Like I said, to recap a little bit, we have to balance. We have to make sure public safety, public security, but there are a lot of people behind bars that really aren't a threat to public and the public life. How can we get them reduce the recidivism, get them back on the right path? And like I said, exactly what you're doing here, show people, hey, boy, I have a skill. I can do things. I didn't know it when these are young people here today. Sure. I didn't realize look how talented they are. And they're all professional. I got to chat with them just before we started. Everybody on TV would realize there's some outstanding young men. And they're all guys. I know there's ladies in here as well. But right here, they're all guys, outstanding young men working on this show.
Our production team today, yes, residents of the center here. So that leads to, when you were talking about giving people a second chance, public safety is certainly an issue. Right. Let's talk about what's been happening in our world of late. The public has not been so safe.
Right.
There's a lot of gun violence. There's a lot of threats to simply going outside your door, as I guess always existed, but it seems to have escalated of late.
We certainly had the issue in in Orlando. There was, Islamic extremism, terrorism that's there, and we have to deal with. And so that, when you talk about gun violence, what that broke into, if you remember in the House of Representatives, there was the day that the minority party decided we're going to take over the floor of the House, and instead of debating and trying to bring forward, they just sat down and squatted and took over the floor of the House. And what they were arguing for, so we just understand what they're arguing for, there's a such thing as called the no-fly list. So it's supposed to be for people who are suspects, terrorist suspects, on the no-fly list. I know a member of Congress that was on the no-fly list.
In other words, they can't fly. They can't get on a plane.
Well, you can get on a plane, but you get extra screened.
Okay.
And so there was a member of Congress named Tom McClintock. There's also, he found out, an Irish terrorist, an IRA terrorist, named Tom McClintock. And so he goes, the airports has to be double screened, triple screened. So, the constitutional right is the Second Amendment for you can buy a firearm. Now, you can lose your rights if you're due process of law. That's the point. So just an arbitrary list shouldn't deprive you of your right to buy a firearm. Because if we were confident in the list, now people got on the list. Ted Kennedy, before he passed away, he was talking about he was on the no-fly list. There was also an Irish terrorist with that name as well. So what we proposed to do, and just we couldn't get the other side to try to move forward, we have someone on our side that wouldn't be for it either, is to say, if you show up to buy a firearm and you're on the no-fly list, then you get flagged. Because it takes you get 72 hours, you get a background check anyway. Now when you go buy a firearm, you get flagged, and then it goes to the prosecutor and says, this person tried to buy a firearm, he's on the no-fly list. Should he be on the no-fly list? Should he not be on the no-fly list, he or she? And that person would go to a judge, and the judge would look at the evidence and say that person shouldn't purchase a firearm. Okay. Now, the person in Orlando was not on the list. So the big argument that happened in the House of Representatives would not have prevented that situation because he was not on the list. He had been taken off.
But he was on there.
He had been taken off.
Right.
Yeah.
Originally he had been on there,
He had
but
been taken off.
taken off.
But if he had been on, and under what we said, you would go to the judge. Now, I actually went to a confidential briefing, so I'm not sure actually what's public, so I'll say, but I guarantee if they'd have gone to the judge with the evidence that I heard, the judge probably would have prevented that person from buying that firearm. Not saying anyone got it somewhere else, got it illegally, whatever.
But this is a lot of red tape. You got to make
we
sure
do that in Kentucky today.
Doing what they're supposed to do.
But let's say we find out that he was radicalized on the internet. Okay. Should we say, okay, you're now suspended the internet's now suspended for people who are on this no-fly list because it radicalizes people for terrorism? I mean, all of America has had them say, well, the First Amendment says a judge has to do that. And so that's the same argument we make. Now, in Kentucky law, if your spouse is threatened by you, you can go to a judge, a family court judge, and you get an emergency protective order.
EPO.
When an EPO is issued against you, you cannot buy a firearm. That's in Kentucky law. Okay. So it's almost the same thing, but instead of you losing your right because of some list, we're saying have a due process. The prosecutor goes to the judge, and you have 72 hours to do it.
Yeah, but you're assuming that everybody's going to go to a gun store and go the legal way and acquire that gun.
Well, if they go the illegal way, the background check does it anyway. so that kind of prevents it.
Yeah.
Well, people are going to buy it, so that gets to the point. So if you limit people from doing it the legal way, then you're going to have people buy it illegally, so it really limits the people who are going to do it legally. So it gets back to the argument that only the illegal people are going to have guns.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle.
It's a vicious circle.
Are we safe in the United States?
I think it's concerned with Islamic radical terrorism. We've seen it happen, not just Islamic radical terrorism. We saw it happen to our police officers in Dallas and other places. It's an uncertain time. I mean, the world is certainly, ISIS is there. We know they're there. I think what we need to do is take them on where they are. It's a lot harder to ship out your hatred and what you're doing when you're having to defend yourself and protect yourself in your own homeland. And so it's
so
not.
You're saying we should go there and take
should,
it on.
we should. I think we should do it with a coalition of people in the Middle East are concerned about ISIS. ISIS, if you look at radical Islamic terrorism, the true ISIS, the people of the caliphs, they think because most people who believe Islam do not believe that. Almost all. There's a very few people who believe Islam that believe what ISIS believes. However, it is a pure following of the Quran and the example of Muhammad. So they believe they're doing what they do because of their interpretation of Islam.
Okay.
So you can't just dismiss that. But almost all Muslims don't believe that, is my point. But so people who truly follow the Caliph or the Caliphate, al-Baghdadi and ISIS would say that most people who follow Islam are not following it, therefore they're worthy of death.
So you're thinking we should enlist.
They threaten the existence of Saudi Arabia. They threaten the existence of all the other countries that don't follow Islam the way they follow it. If you really read if they do what they say they're going to do, which they seem to have done that. And so I think what we've lost over the last several years is our ability to build coalitions that respect the United States with these countries. Outside of that, where they're putting their troops on the ground. We have the Kurds we could use. We have obviously the Arabic countries that are there that have soldiers. Saudi
So
Arabia
we would train
by
them
it,
like we've done in the past. We would train them to
and
go
have their boots
against.
on the ground because they're more threatened about it than really we are. Although we're threatened by it because it's come here. We've seen Orlando.
Right. So there's really.
It's not an easy solution.
No.
And anybody that wants to say it's easy is not. But it's from surveillance. It's from but following constitutionally. We argue about the First Amendment with the Second and all the others. But surveillance is important. Having the FISA courts, we call them, you go to a judge. If you're going to watch someone, you go to a judge and you say, these are the evidence that I have that I believe this person is.
And it has to be compelling and legitimate.
It has to be articulable suspicion. And so that was some of the argument in the no-fly list is how do you get on the no-fly list? What does it have to be compelling? Does it have to be reasonable suspicion? I was for reasonable suspicion, but the judge, it has to go to a judge. I think if you go to a judge, say, hey, we reasonably believe this person is going to use this weapon for a terrorist attack, the judge looks at the evidence and prevents them from buying it.
You know, you've got children. You've got one, like you said, going off to become a journalist. And in your lifetime, do you think we're going to get to a place where you don't use those words? We are living in uncertain times.
You know, it's interesting. It's hard to get your mind around it now because you know what's going on around the world. It just takes one person who's a lone wolf who's radicalized, and so we always have to be vigilant. But when I was in the Army in the 1980s, if somebody would tell me the Soviet Union would not exist and the Berlin Wall would be down, I would say never in my lifetime. And now Russia's coming back. So there are a lot of things going on in the world. I mean, we thought the Soviet Union were gone. There was actually a book written in 1990 called The End of History, that capitalism, America won, and the world's going to be safe for capitalism and freedom and opportunity. And so you're always going to have to be vigilant. You're always going to have to protect freedom.
They're back. They're back. We're going to talk more about that, Russia's rise. In addition, we get to talk politics. Donald Trump. Right after this. Stay with us. And Outlook continues. We are coming to you from inside the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center. This is kind of a vocational education opportunity that we have presented. We've collaborated with the center here. And running camera, running everything today, bringing you this show, our residents that we have worked with. Our production team has worked with them for the past days. And today's their graduation, if you will, because we're bringing you the show. In addition, we are delighted to have with us on the Outlook set Congressman Brett Guthrie. Before the break, we were talking about uncertain times. You know, we do live in uncertain times. I posed the question to you, do you think in our lifetimes we won't wake up saying that? You
hope so.
Well, you talked about the fact that you didn't think Russia would ever go away and the Berlin Wall would come down, but guess what? It did.
Union, Russia's back. Yeah,
I beg your
unfortunately.
pardon. So Russia's back. Let's talk about Putin.
Well, it's a concern. If you remember in 2012, during the debate with Mitt Romney and the president, Mitt Romney said, who's our biggest enemy there? And this is before really ISIS kind of became who they are today. And Mitt Romney said, Russia. And the president made a joke about it. Remember that? And here's the quote. He goes, this is the 1980s. We want our foreign policy back. And he laughed at Mitt Romney for saying that. And so, I mean, he didn't even take it serious. And here we are. They were doing the Russian reset, and Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. And they were doing the Russian reset, and they thought we just got all this figured out. Well, the world's a very complex place, and without building the coalitions and moving it forward, and so we are where we are, and it's a very concerning time, I think, for Russia. I'm a member of a committee that's part of NATO in the Congress, a NATO committee, and so I deal with our NATO parliamentarians, and they are concerned about Russia and their activity in the Balkans, and some of these are our allies. You know, Latvia, Lithuania, we actually are on the NATO treaty, and that's something that got a little Donald Trump conversation the other day, but we are treaty-wise, if Putin was to attack one of those, we're obligated. Attack on one is attack on all. And we have to absolutely get a handle on that situation. And we kind of been drifting in that, I think, in foreign policy for at least last 4 years, if not even before.
So the next president, foreign policy is going to be hugely important.
The next president, it's the most important. I think, how are we going to move forward? And the next president have to deal with the rise of Russia, the re-emergence of Russia, and the next president have to deal with ISIS, and how we're going to deal with radical
Or if
terrorism.
it's not ISIS, it'll be someone else.
And so it's a very difficult place. And so I know you want to talk about Donald Trump. When people ask me, there's a lot of things Donald Trump said that I haven't agreed with the way he said it, how he said it, or even the tone of what he said. But if you look at, are we going to continue the same, like we have the last 4 years, dealing with Russia and ISIS? Other thing is that people don't talk about now because of all this going on across the world is our debt crisis that's coming. That hasn't gone away.
It hasn't gone away.
But I'm just saying of the issues, the debt crisis hasn't gone away either. And so how are you going to have somebody that's going to sign a bill that's going to change the way we're putting debt on our children?
I understand. But let's talk about Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Who's going to be better at foreign policy, in your opinion?
Well, I think we know what Hillary Clinton's going to continue the presidents, and the presidents move forward. And so that is, do you think we're stable in the world now? And do you need change in where we're going forward? Donald Trump needs to articulate better what he's going to do.
Is it just a matter of articulation?
Well, I think that if you look at, I know he's talking with members of Congress, not me personally. I haven't been in that inner circle with him.
Have you ever met him?
I have met him. He came and spoke to all of us as a group, all the Republican House members as a group, met him there. I actually ran into him in Atlantic City one time in the 1990s. Oh, there's Donald Trump, the celebrity.
But that was
a little different. And so when I say if you met him, I met him twice. One was back.
Is he as charming as they say he is?
You know, he kind of walked in and spoke to a group, to whoever. Okay. But so we were kind of listening more about what he was going to say and move forward. And we still needs to articulate. I think every day, anytime he's talking about anything other than we need to deal with the rise of Russia, we need to deal with ISIS, that's what he needs to be talking about every day. I got to ask you this.
So, yeah, he needs to articulate. It's one thing to articulate. It's you're going to put some meat on those bones. You're going to be able to put some substance behind what you're articulating.
Who's going to put into place and the kind of people around him. And I will tell you, in terms of the domestic side of it, because the area that I've been working with our Speaker, Paul Ryan, who's always been...
Who, incidentally, is not, as of today, getting the nod from Donald Trump.
I know.
But not yet, anyway.
You know, I wish everything that Trump would say was talking about how we're going to deal with foreign policy, how we're going to deal with domestic issues. But when I first got to Congress, Paul Ryan was the budget guru. And so we took majority in 2010, and we put out a balanced budget proposal. If you remember, the other side showed video of him, of an actor looking like him pushing a lady over the cliff. We're getting close to that cliff, and we're getting closer and closer. Medicaid goes bankrupt Medicare in the next 9 years, and we're talking about fixing it for people 55 and older for permanently, and then changing it for younger people coming forward. It's becoming a big threat. And the question is, we're going back to $1 trillion deficits. Trillion dollar deficit, just because baby boomers are retiring. It's just demographics. And if we don't deal with healthcare spending, of course, the president added to healthcare spending, but if we don't sit down and deal with it's getting close to half our budget is just healthcare spending, Medicare, Medicaid, and others. And we need to preserve it for people who have it, but we have to change it for people in the future. And the question, who's going to sign a bill that's going to put us on a pathway to fiscal responsibility?
Oh, that's a scary thing to do.
Because one of those days, if we don't do it, we're going to wake up one day, maybe sooner rather than later. Nobody really knows the day where China says we're not going to buy the bonds and we can't fund our government, and we're going to end up like Greece. And Paul Ryan always says this is a crisis we know is coming, and it's the most preventable crisis America has if we deal with it.
It's a matter as to whether people listen.
And then even last year we put a 10-year balanced budget in a reconciliation bill, and the president vetoed it. And who's going to sign a bill that's going to put us into fiscal? I'm not going to sign the bill. That's not but I will certainly vote for a bill that puts us on a sustainable fiscal path.
You will?
We voted out of the House since 2010. We actually put some on the president's desk this year with the majority in the Senate with Senator McConnell as the majority leader. And if he's still in there and we have somebody that'll sign the bill, I think we can get this country back on a sustainable fiscal path. If not, these young people that are working for us, that work in these cameras today, are going to have to pay back already $20 trillion nearly in debt.
So who's going to be the one to sign that bill, Trump or Clinton?
Well, that's the question I'm asking. Who do you think would sign the bill? The president obviously wouldn't sign a bill like that. And so I think that Trump would be the one that would sign a bill like that. He doesn't talk about entitlement reform.
Right.
But I believe that as the House of Representatives specifically, it's called A Better Way. You can go to Paul Ryan's website or my website and find A Better Way. And it lays out the things that we want to reform, what we're going to do to replace Obamacare, how we're going to reform entitlements, how we're going to make entitlements, which you have Social Security, Medicare, which people pay into. But you also have that are traditional welfare programs, are separate from those.
So take a look at it. What is it called again?
It's called A Better Way. But we want to, what Paul Ryan says, welfare was not to replace work. It was to get people on a bridge to work, and that's what we're focusing on.
To work. We're out of time. A special thanks to our crew at the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center for taking over the show today, running the show, and a very special thank you.
I enjoyed meeting them all. It's great to be here. Thank you
Indeed.
very much.
Congressman Brett Guthrie. That's going to wrap it up for this On Location Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. Thanks for being here.